Welcome to the Fast Leader Podcast, where we explore convenient yet effective shortcuts that will help you get ahead and move forward faster by becoming a better leader. And now, here's your host, customer and employee engagement expert and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, Jim Rimbaugh.
Call Center Coach develops and unites the next generation of call center leaders. Through our e-learning and community, individuals gain knowledge and skills in the 6 core competencies that is the blueprint that develops high-performing call center leaders. Successful supervisors do not just happen. So go to callcentercoach.com to learn more about enrollment and download your copy of the Supervisor Success Path ebook now. Okay, Fast Leader Legion, today I'm excited because we have somebody on the show today who hopefully is going to help me get over something that I've had a problem with for a long time. And if I have a problem with it, I would dare to suspect that a lot of other folks do as well. Hamish Knox grew up in the village of Malacca, British Columbia, halfway between Vancouver and Calgary on the Trans-Canada Highway on a 10-acre hobby farm. His parents instilled in him a passion for education and discovery. George Carlin, at the age of 8, instilled a love of language and languages that continues to this day. Both of his parents have a background in education. If he's being cheeky, he'll say that he joined Sandler because his mom always wanted him to be a teacher. Hamish actually started coaching when he was in his teens as one of the founding coaches of the Sicamous, British Columbia Minor Soccer Association, or Associates. He also founded the men's basketball team with 5 friends at his secondary school when he was in grade 10 and founded a women's basketball team as head coach when he was in grade 11. Hamish owns Sandler in Calgary, part of the larger global Sandler network, but he started out as a sport journalist, mostly writing for the Other Press in Westminster, British Columbia. He also wrote for Inside Lacrosse magazine and has written for India Business Magazine and the Green Sky blog. Hamish has written 2 books, both on topics no one likes to talk about: Accountability the Sandler Way and Change the Sandler Way. His work fueled his passion for education, specifically gaining expertise in neuroscience, human psychology, behavior, and development. A model of the human brain sits in his primary training room of his training center and is a reoccurring feature during sessions, especially with his leadership development group. Shortly after he joined Sandler Network, Hamish started training in Muay Thai under Master Mike Miles in Calgary, where he discovered synergies between the structure of Muay Thai and the structure of the systems he shares with his clients. In 2016, he earned his first black belt and continues to train regularly while supporting fighters at the gym through sponsorships so that they can compete locally and internationally. Hamish lives in Calgary with his wife of 16 years, Kim, and daughters, Taylor and Lexi. And he also makes jam and sausage, and sometimes he says he shares.
Sometimes.
Hamish Knox, are you ready to help us get over the hump?
I am ready, Jim. Let's rock and roll.
I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad we're talking about this particular subject. But before we go into that, I've shared with my Legion a little bit about you, but can you share what your current passion is so that we can get to know you even better?
Absolutely. My passion is really around human behavior and the brain. If you strip Sandler down to the core, we're about facilitating better human-to-human interactions and supporting our clients to have better human-to-human interactions personally and professionally. So I love human behavior.
Well, and you and I had the opportunity to talk off mic. I said, for me, being in the customer care, customer service contact center industry, I said, well, heck, we're doing the same thing, but it's at mass scale.
Totally.
And so for me, though, going on this particular topic of accountability, we also talked off mic about this a little bit. And so for me, it's gotten to the point where I just cannot stand hearing that word because it's been so vilified in the media. And anytime I hear holding people accountable, in my mind start seeing hands around a throat and then just starting to be clenched and squeezed. And totally. That's not what we want to do with people and acquaintances and friends. And heck, just think about it from a society perspective. I don't think that's where it should be. Do you?
No, not at all. But what I do believe is that accountability is exactly what you've described, Jim. It's the beatings will continue until morale improves, which is not a great way to run a business or a society or a family or a friendship. But if people come to you and say, a micromanager is someone who's saying, hey, Jim, what are you doing on this? Hey, Jim, what are you doing on that? Hey, Jim, what are you doing on this? But what we teach our clients to do is if I come to you on Monday and say, hey, Jim, high five, great to see you. what are you going to accomplish this week? And you might say, well, I'm going to move this file forward and I'm going to work on this project and do this and this and this and this. And I'll say, great, Jim, see you on Friday. And on Friday, we sit down and go, hey, Jim, high five, great week. On Monday, you said you were going to do this, 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 and this. How do you do? And you might say, man, I rocked it on that project. And then you might be like, well, but this other thing kind of slipped off because I was fighting a fire. Hey, Jim, these things happen. How are you going to make it up? And as I tell all the leaders I work with, if it comes out of their mouth, it's real. If it comes out of your mouth, you're a pushy micromanager.
Thanks for sharing that. And that was what you just talked about right there is one of the myths that you referred to. That's one of the top myths as far as accountability goes in the book. And there's 3 others, of course, because we said 4. So Big Brother, well, that was the one that you were referring to.
Yep.
And then the other 3 are too much time, veteran team, and they'll lead. So if you could, tell us a little bit about what too much time actually means.
So too much time is exactly the excuse that I get back from leaders where they say, Hamish, accountability, great idea, gonna take way too much time. And this is actually built on, there are people coming back and saying, we'll use a sales context. Hey, Jim, I really want to be accountable. I really want to do that CRM entry and track my activities. But you're just going to have to assume that I'm going to do less sales, man, because I'm doing all this extra admin work. And the fact of the matter is that's not true, because you make the accountability program fit the way that your people work naturally. So it's going to be a bit different for everybody, but everybody's going to hit the same mountaintop. And then the leaders think, well, it's going to take way too much time because, as you've identified, they've been socialized, that accountability is hands around the throat. I got to wrestle you into submission. All I'm doing is using your own data that you gave me on Monday to circle back on Friday and say, how do you do?
That's a good point. In addition, as you were talking, I started thinking about the one of the quotes that I started sharing with my kids that resonates with them now. It's like, okay, you can take easy now and deal with hard later.
Mm-hmm.
Do not hard now and receive the gift of easy later.
Love it.
When you start talking about the whole accountability piece, too much time, it's like, okay, well, where do you want to spend it? Because you're going to spend significantly more out on the back end of it, trying to fix the things that you didn't address on the front end.
Exactly.
So the other thing is you talk about veteran team.
Yeah. Well, the veteran team it comes in 2 flavors. So the one is talking to a leader and they go, listen, Hamish, we've got a veteran team. These people know what they need to do. Well, no, they are doing what they think they need to do in order to be successful. And most of them are probably stuck very deeply into a comfort zone, but because it hasn't been detrimental to the organization, the leader just lets it go. The other side of it is when a leader's got an accountability program in place, and I've seen this happen several times with my clients. They bring a veteran in, doesn't matter what the role is. They bring a veteran in and the veteran says, listen, got it, accountability. Great for you, great for those newbies that you've got on your team. But you hired me because I'm a veteran. I've got experience. I've got a book of business. I don't need that accountability stuff. And I was telling this story to a CEO group that I was speaking to, and there was a leader in there from a large construction company, and they put up their hand and said, every veteran they've ever hired has not worked out for that exact reason.
Well, for me, I just started thinking about the whole screening process, right? Also, I know now, maybe I didn't know back then, when they start talking about the whole experience thing versus, mindset and attitude and everything else, is that I would rather hire somebody who is a continuous learner, who has some humility, someone who thinks they know it all and therefore they're not open to new ideas.
Absolutely.
So when you start also talking about the veteran team component, for many years I was part of doing analytics work, for contact centers, and we looked at customer experience associated with, people performance. And what we actually found is that those veteran folks, they had some really bad habits that caused some really bad issues.
Yeah.
And so
surprising.
Well, it is. And so what we found is that we can even put a time clock on it from a calendar perspective and know that typically in a contact center, we talk about frontline workers, about that 11-month time frame is when that decline started to occur.
Wow.
So we actually saw a negative impact to the customer experience for people who had tenure hitting that window. And it was fairly common across a lot of different companies and industries. And so we kind of built that into the process to say, okay, this is coming. So you need to start doing some intervention components and elements at month 10 so that, you don't experience that decline.
Absolutely.
So when you start talking about data and analytics and working with clients, I mean, do you see some similar type of tendencies when you start talking about this accountability component and tenure and life cycle and things along those lines?
Absolutely. And when it comes into launching the program, it's really building that why in, right? It's not just like, hey, I had this idea or I read a book by some guy named Hamish and now all of a sudden we're going to do accountability. There's got to be a real reason why behind it. And that actually ties into the whole they'll leave component because biggest fear of a leader is, I don't want to have to go through the pain of hiring. Well, the fact is that you're going to have turnover. And what my clients have experienced is the people who self-select, which is my favorite HR cliche, when they implement an accountability program, are the ones they probably wanted off their bus anyways. And now they have a mechanism to gently and nurturingly move them off the bus. And in a couple of cases, it was some of the higher performers who had built their success on really a bunch of sand, and it was going to fall apart. And so as soon as they saw this accountability program in, they're like, well, I can't keep sweeping stuff under the rug anymore. I better just get out of here. And then what was uncovered after they left was, they had built their success on a bed of sand, and it was going to fall apart. It's good that we learned about this now instead of later.
It's interesting that you bring that up. And so from my perspective, one of the things that I always try to do is flip this whole accountability thing to an ownership scenario, meaning that we want people to take ownership of the things that we want them to take ownership of. And from an accountability perspective, I want them to do that to themselves. You know what? Hold yourself accountable. Have that be something that's a self-motivation issue and a self-responsibility issue. And for me, I just want you to own this piece, and I try to create an environment therefore people will do that. I mean, how does that differ, or how does that align with what you're talking about?
Oh, you're absolutely right. Accountability should be a support mechanism, not a stick. And one of the mantras that the leaders we work with here regularly is, your people don't work for you because they love you or your business. They work for you because they believe that working for you is going to get them to reaching their personal goals faster than working for someone else. And so when they do turn over and they leave and they're going to say it's for more money or a better title or better benefits or more flexibility, what they really mean is they believe that working for someone else is going to get them to their personal mountaintop faster than staying for your team. So when you can tie achievement of their personal goals to achievement of your corporate goals, now they own it. Now you've got a rocket ship who's going to blast you further than you ever wanted to be because they're self-motivated, and all you need to do is gently, support them along the way up to those mountaintops, both personal and professional.
Okay, so I have to share with you, as you were talking, I started thinking about yet another thing that for me is just like, it's just like one of those, why would you do that? Because talking about the human behavior and the neuroscience is that this whole exit interview thing. It's like people don't. First of all, even if they knew that it's this whole goal issue and that they don't know how to verbalize that.
No,
and they're not going to.
No,
a lot of times either. So when you start looking at the data that they get from exit interviews, I'm like, how really valuable is that? So one of the things you talked about right there also was this whole helping people to understand, their goals. And you do have several, different components of going through that particular process and helping people to do that. And when you start looking at, organizations that you've worked with, and because here's one of my things that also too, I think is a huge gap, is that I don't think that a lot of people actually go through the exercise and activity of helping to identify those things for themselves. And that the only way that they go through any type of goal setting or any type of, even values, what are your values, is when they do it in a corporate environment. They typically don't do it by self.
True.
So how much time do you actually spend going through that activity and helping people to become effective at that activity as part of putting in an accountability program?
It's one of the first exercises that we do with any of our clients. It's because until we establish where are you trying to go, we have no way to design a path to get there. It's Yogi Berra, a very current reference for everyone who's listening. He said, if you don't know where you're going, you might end up someplace else. And so we need to really define what are the mountaintops that you're trying to get to and the whys behind those mountaintops. And then we can design a path from base camp, where we're at today, all the way to the path of the mountain. The other side of it, Jim, you're absolutely right, is we typically don't do goal setting, because what is beaten into us from the time that we're in grade school is you win or you lose. And we believe that you win or you learn. So yes, you may fail. You may not get to your mountaintop. But what I have seen, both in myself and in people I work with, if I say that I'm going to set a goal of losing 5 pounds, we'll make it something that probably everyone who's listening has done or had a friend do. I'm going to lose 5 pounds. Well, you know what? I may only lose 4 pounds, but it's probably 4 more pounds that I lost that I wouldn't have if I didn't set that goal. And what we teach our clients to do is just be better than 0. If you're not exercising, do a push-up. Now you're exercising, and build from there. But especially from winners, people who are, the type A mindset, that's not good enough, right? They should be doing 25 push-ups. Well, no. You got to build from somewhere, because if you go from 0 to 25 push-ups, you're going to burn out, you're going to fail. And that's the same thing with accountability, is ongoing growth over time. Let's not go from 0 to 60. Let's go from 0 to 1 and build from there.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Another thing that you talk about in the book is this IR theory.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a very valuable point that I think pretty much everybody needs to go through. So talk about the IR theory.
Thank you. Thanks for asking about that, Jim. So I is identity. R is role. So roles are the answers to I am a blank. So if I say, hey, Jim, what are you? I'm a podcaster, I'm a business person, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All the labels that you apply to yourself. And one of my colleagues says they're like suits. You can take them on and off, right? Like now I'm going home, I'm going to put on the dad suit and the husband suit. And those are things that are given to us as we grow through our life. Like when we're born, we have no roles. And the identity is all the self. It's everything that's related to ourself. So it's our self-concept, it's our self-worth, it's our self-identity. And like I say to my clients, when I was born, my parents didn't say, oh, look, we got an entrepreneur. We were hoping for an engineer, but we got an entrepreneur instead, and much less a salesperson. Oh, no. No, they said we got a wonderful human being. And what we end up with is what we call IR confusion, right? So we believe that success in our roles determines our self-worth. And the more that we buy into that, the less likely we are to risk. Because if we buy into that concept that our success in our roles is our self-worth, well, if we fail, now we're a failure. And no one wants to be a failure. Whereas if we can separate our success in our roles from our self-worth, now we can win or learn. And we can take our failures and turn them into learning moments.
I love that you just shared that because to me, that's also one of the things that I often run into, because for those that listen to other podcasts, on the Fast Leader Show, I read a bio and an introduction that's quite different. Some people are like, shorten it. But I'm like, no. I'm not going to do that, because here's the reality of our lives is that it's not what you do that makes you great. It's who you are that makes what you do great.
Amen.
And so therefore, the bio that I want to read, it has a little bit of an insight into who these people are that are actually on our show. And I've had so many guests say, I've never written a bio like that before.
Yeah.
And say it was a fun exercise. Because really, it's even when we meet people, what we don't want to know, hey, what do you do? But that's what we ask. But what we want to know is, who are you? You know? And do I want to stay here or get the heck out? Right? And that's what it comes down to. And so I think it's really important that this whole IR thing, really gets fleshed out, not just from, an accountability or ownership issue or things. I just think overall, that's a very, very important exercise that would benefit us all in many different ways.
It's something I have been doing with my eldest daughter since she was probably 2. And so in the identity role scale, you're a 10. We say everyone's an I-10, which means you are that wonderful human being. Doesn't mean you don't have head trash. Doesn't mean you can't grow, but it means you have awesome self-worth just as a human being. And so I will say, is Taylor an I-10? And so actually this morning before I left for work, I gave her a hug. I said, is Taylor an I-10? And she said, yes, I am. And I said, great, ask good questions today.
I think that's awesome. I mean, it's great training. I mean, it's good mindset conditioning. I mean, all those things that are important to creating someone who has, a good sense of well-being. So
absolutely.
Kudos. I'm definitely going to have to use that one. Not mine. I'm definitely going to have to use that one. Okay. So everything that we're talking about here, and we've hit on it on several occasions, is really, it's emotional based. It's because when we don't have focus and we're not heading in the right direction and we're not holding ourselves accountable, we don't have ownership of something, we can't achieve. All those things create negative emotions. Well, on the show, we like to look at quotes to hopefully put us in a right and positive mindset. Is there a quote or two that you like that you can share?
Well, and one of them, you read it in my bio, is I discovered George Carlin when I was 8, which may be too young. But he had a quote in his parental advisory album, which was, I don't like euphemisms or euphemistic language. And it finishes with the language that takes the life out of life. And I know from personal experience, we don't like having the mirror held up to us, and we don't like people saying, hey, you really let me down, or hey, you were a bad husband or a bad father or a bad friend or whatever. But it sucks in the moment to hear that. But it ends up being way better to hear that in the moment than 3 months, 6 months, 9 years from now, where someone's got so much pent up anger and aggression and they just let go on you that they've been holding on to this for so long. I would rather eliminate the euphemisms and just speak plainly with everyone. Sometimes we have to have difficult conversations, but those are better conversations than the ones that we could have down the road.
It's true. I mean, we have to address those things, prior, because they become mountains. You mentioned that word, but it was for a better reason. But they become mountains later.
Absolutely. And the other one I guess I would share, Jim, is it's one of David Sandler's rules, which is they can't argue with their own data. That can sound sort of mean and maybe aggressive, but fact of the matter is, like I said earlier, if it comes out of their mouth, it's real. And it's like when we talk about goal setting, and when we talk about goal setting with leaders, they'll say, well, they have quotas. If we look at a sales team, well, they have quotas. Well, a quota is not a goal, it's a gift. A quota is something given to you. It's a gift because it can allow you to grow from the quota, but a goal is something that's internal.
I think that's a very important distinction. Not what you do. I mean, it's who you are. I mean,
exactly.
Important. Okay, so talking about the work with the daughter, the work with the family, learning martial arts. I mean, all of these things, I'm sure, throughout the course of your life, you've had some humps that you've had to get over. But can you share one of the stories so that we can learn?
Yeah, and two very quick ones. So when I've been a sports addict since I was little, and when I was 27, I got to work in pro sports. So I had my dream job when I was 27, and I do remember sitting at my desk. I was like 2-3 months into the job, and I'm like, so where do I go from here? And then I committed to actually doing basketball. Joined a men's league basketball team, and I actually I took a bachelor's degree online. But then also when I got into Sandler, so I had a bit of a window between when I joined Sandler and when I actually launched my business. And so in that window, I went through all of Sandler's content 3 times. So I thought, I got this. And so when I came back from my initial training, I just stopped learning. I stopped listening. I stopped reading. And about 8 weeks in, I had a 20-minute prospecting call with a senior vice president for a chemical company, which was the single worst 20 minutes of my life. And it wasn't the 20 minutes worst of my life because of what he did. It was because of what I did. And I hung up that phone and I called my father, and I spent 90 minutes on the phone with him going like, what the heck do I do from here? Like, what is this thing I've got into? And it made me realize that I had stopped learning. And that was my fault, no one else's.
I think that's a very good insight. So you have to tell us what was the outcome of that.
So with the after I talked to my dad, I committed to a minimum of 1 hour of Sandler content every day. And Sandler's got lots of audios and videos for the trainers. So every day for 1 hour, I was listening to something. I also committed to reading a minimum of 15 pages of a business book every business day. and I typically went through on the weekends. So I was constantly learning, constantly growing, and that's where I am today. I'm continually learning about the brain and about human behavior, because if I stop doing that, I'm not growing. And if I'm not growing, then I'm not providing value to my clients, and I'm not in a good position to support them.
That's a really good, important point that you're making here, because one of the things that I always talk about is that, oftentimes we expect people to coach the ones that report to them.
Right.
And so for me, I'm like, okay, are they being coached? Because there's no way that a coach can coach if they're not being coached themselves.
Amen. We say if you don't own it, you can't coach it.
So when you start looking at some of the things on the back of the book, where you talking about being or overcoming some issues, being able to put an accountability program in place. Mm-hmm. And we didn't need to say we can't go into them all, but what would be one of the big ones that you see as an issue?
Number one is the leader is not willing to be held accountable. This is right away pushback that we'll get is they may not say it in so many words, but you can see them thinking, if I have to hold my team accountable, that means I have to be accountable. And they just don't want that. And humans are animals, and animals have no capacity to process language. All they can do is observe behavior. And so if what's coming out of the leader's mouth is accountability and accountability and accountability, but their behavior is incongruent, they're telling their team everything they need to know about accountability through their behavior. And then when we get involved and they're all frustrated about why is my team not accountable? Well, I bet if I followed that leader around for, half a day at the minimum, at the maximum, I would actually see that they're teaching their people through their behavior instead of through their words.
I love that you said that, because I had the opportunity to have a conversation with somebody, and they were a senior level leader, and they said one of their managers came in and was talking about, people not engaging in doing certain things, and that, we should put in essentially penalties in place, for them not doing these things. And he goes, what do I tell a person like that? I said, you look him straight in the eye and say, yeah, let's start with you.
Amen. I love it. I love it.
And so it's like, if you're not willing to have that inflicted upon you, you sure you want to do it to others?
Exactly. Another one, Jim, that just popped into my head as you were saying that is not creating clarity. A leader's number one job is to create clarity. And so when we look at this accountability program, and we talked earlier about the why and all of that, we need to be completely clear with what are the expectations and what exactly are we holding you accountable to. And then we got to talk about the big C, right? What are the consequences? And by the way, when everybody hears the word consequence in business, they hear you're fired. And that's not true. There's got to be what we call it the consequence ladder, because, everyone's going to screw up. We're all human beings. We're all going to fall off every now and then. So as a leader, again, it's a support tool. We have to have a way of picking that person back up. But at the same time, if they're not willing to be accountable, we also have to have a way of eventually moving them on if they're not going to be supportive of the accountability culture that we're building in their organization.
Well, for me, I'm glad you said that too, because I start talking and share that consequences are really everything. Consequences are the consequences of doing all of those things and having promotions, commissions, opportunities. Those are positive consequences.
Right.
People have consequences of apathy. Nothing happens.
Totally.
Negative consequences. But unfortunately, much like accountability, we think of consequences as, oh no.
Exactly. I'm really glad that you brought up positive consequences first, because we forget that the word consequence is neutral. It's the result of something, of doing something or not doing something. So if I don't do the activities that need to get me to my sales target, well, I have a negative consequence. If I do the activities that get me to my sales target, I will have a positive consequence. The word consequence ends up being neutral, but most people layer it as negative.
That's so true. Okay, so you got a lot of things going on, and two young kids, trying to raise them right, have the business, be successful, promote the book, which is huge. I'm sure be a good husband's on there as well. Probably not.
Absolutely.
But when you start looking at all these goals, what's just one of them?
My goal is, it ties into both, is to have a completely self-multiplying company. which means that whether I'm here or not, the business not only survives, but it thrives and grows, which will give me the freedom to spend time with my family as I choose. So if I want to pick up my girls every Friday from school, I can do that. If one of them gets into a traveling arts organization or sport team and they've got a tournament, hundreds of miles away, I can just pick up and go to that because I can support them. And then of course I can, spend some time, quality time with my wife, growing as a couple together when I see fit, as opposed to saying, well, honey, or well, kids, dad can't do that because he's got to fill in whatever blank that is that day.
And the Fast Leader Legion wishes you the very best. Now, before we move on, let's get a quick word from our sponsor. An Even Better Place to Work is an easy-to-use solution that gives you a continuous diagnostic on employee engagement along with integrated activities that will improve employee engagement and leadership skills in everyone. Using this award-winning solution is guaranteed to create motivated, productive, and loyal employees who have great work relationships with their colleagues and your customers. To learn more about An Even Better Place to Work, visit beyondmorale.com/better. All right, here we go, Fast Leader Legion. It's time for the Hump Day Hoedown. Okay, Hamish, the Hump Day Hoedown is a part of our show where you give us good insights fast. So I'm going to ask you several questions, and your job is to give us robust yet rapid responses that are going to help us move onward and upward faster. Hamish Knox, are you ready to hoe down?
Yahoo!
All right. So what do you think is holding you back from being an even better leader today?
Two things: making decisions based on my ego and saying yes to too many things.
What is the best leadership advice you have ever received?
Take care of yourself first, which sounds selfish, but I have worked with too many leaders who do not take care of themselves first, and then they can't support their people.
What is one of your secrets that you believe contributes to your success?
When I do something, I'm 110% committed. My best man at my wedding, the night before my wedding, we were sitting around having a drink, and he said, you know what? I've been to a lot of weddings, and every groom that I've ever met is terrified of what's going to happen the next day. You're the only one who I've met who's completely 100% committed to what's going to happen tomorrow.
What is one of your best tools that helps you lead in business or life?
Creating clarity, speaking plainly, and making sure that everyone's on the same page with what has to be done by when before we go our separate ways.
And what would be one book that you'd recommend to our Legion? It could be from any genre. Of course, we're going to put a link to Accountability the Sandler Way on your show notes page as well.
Awesome. You know what? It's a book I discovered a couple of years ago. It's called Profit First by a guy named Michael Michalowicz. It is, I'm a systems and processes guy. Sandler is about systems and processes. Profit First is a system for managing profit in your business.
Okay, Fast Leader Legion, you can find links to that and other bonus information from today's show by going to fastleader.net/Hamish Knox, and that's Knox. Okay, Hamish, this is my last Hump Day Hoedown question. Imagine you were given the opportunity to go back to the age of 25. And you've been given the chance to take the knowledge and skills that you have now back with you, but you can't take everything. You can only choose one. So what skill or piece of knowledge would you take back with you, and why?
It ties into the answer about the book is taking the knowledge of finances back. That was never anything that was discussed when I was growing up. And I had a lot of scripting and head trash around how money worked. And so if I could go back and take the knowledge that I've gained about money in the last few years, I would be much farther ahead, both personally and professionally, in terms of my finances. Not that I'm doing bad, but I would be farther ahead.
Hamish, it was an honor to spend time with you today. Can you please share with the Fast Leader Legion how they can connect with you?
Thanks for asking, Jim. So you can connect with me via Twitter and Instagram. I'm at Sandler Hamish. I'm on LinkedIn. I publish an article every Sunday. And you can also find me via sandler.com.
Hamish Knox, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. The Fast Leader Legion honors you and thanks you for helping us get over the hump. Thank you for joining me on the Fast Leader Show today. For recaps, links from every show, special offers, and access to download and subscribe, if you haven't already, head on over to fastleader.net so we can help you move onward and upward faster.